Hey, what's going on? This is Luke Humphrey here, and I just realized it was 10 years since the second edition of Hanson's Marathon Method came out, which means I think the first edition came out about 5 years before that. So it's been 15 years since that has happened. That is wildly insane to me because ultimately the book changed the trajectory of what I do for a living. But yeah, I mean, it's a long time and things change. So with that being said, I want to read what I wrote. First of all, what I think is more impressive is that Kevin and Keith developed these plans, I'm going to say at least 30 years ago. I think 91 is when they first I know the stores started in 1991, but I think the plans were right around there too. And they really started just for the Detroit Marathon. And since then, have become what they are today. And I mean, this was well before the Hanson's Brooks Distance Project came into existence. So this is the predecessor to all of that stuff. And so it's not to say that things have not changed, but overall, I think the book itself is the backbone of my coaching philosophy. It was the backbone of how I was coached as an elite athlete, a term I use loosely. And the idea of cumulative fatigue, in particular to marathon training, is still relevant. I think terminology's changed, but overall, I think that the system has changed is the same. I don't think that really needs a lot of adjustment. But I do think that how things are approached can be more individualized, and I think that's where people get hung up sometimes. So I have looked, I've coached, me personally, I've probably coached over 1,000 people in the last 20 years. And maybe not that much, maybe several hundred, I would say several hundred people. I've been involved with thousands of people's training since 2006. When you look at it, I mean, we sell about 1,000 training plans a year. We have multiple people in our memberships, and we have on average anywhere from 90 to 150 people on our coached athlete roster. So yeah, it's getting up there. You multiply that, you multiply that by a long enough time and it adds up, right? So but anyway, I've looked at a lot of training logs to say, and with those observations, it's not about changing the systems, but it's about having the tools to individualize it better. And that's what I want to go into today a little bit, based on a couple different areas we can modify when it comes to the idea of cumulative fatigue. I think that's the big one, right? And since I think cumulative fatigue itself is the hottest topic in the book, maybe not bigger than the 16-mile long run, but it's intertwined with the 16-mile long run. It's a great place to go in depth with things. And since writing the book, technology and the sentiment that comes with that has changed quite a bit with all the wearables and their new metrics and all this other stuff that's come out. You can wear a glucose monitor. When I first came out, Garmin's didn't even exist. And I don't want to be the old guy. Oh, back in my day, I don't want to do that. But I'm just stating that that didn't exist. Heart rate monitors existed. A lot's changed. I mean, now you wear a glucose monitor. They're working on lactate monitors that you can wear directly next to your skin. Prototypes for those have been out for years. You can wear orthotics with pressure sensors in them. You can, you have a wrist-based heart rate now with the arm-based heart rate monitoring. You have so many things out there now, and then so many different metrics that you can look at. I truly, truly feel that we have become so optimized that we've optimized ourselves out of our own discernment. We just sometimes lack a judgment because we don't know how we actually feel, because we're just so wrapped up in numbers, and then it's tough. But the other side of that, though, is I do see, at least I feel like we've shifted our beliefs from being lower volume training to higher volume. I think higher volume is becoming more in vogue again, which I personally like. I just think that the volume has to fit what you're trying to accomplish, right? Like if you're running 100 miles a week and trying to run a 3:45 marathon, I think that's out of skewed a little bit. Whereas I have multiple runners who are running 240 to 250 in the marathon, and they're running 60 to 70 miles a week, where that would have been, but I think that's the thing. I think that's I think that's a good thing, right? We're increasing the volume, but we're keeping it appropriate. And I think that's huge. So we do have, I think there's good and there's bad things going on, but my observations over the last decade are that more and more people want to put in bigger weekly volumes. But some of that I do think that is overkill for what they're trying to accomplish. But I do like the idea overall of training more and more. But as I've gotten older, I've kind of more embraced the idea that I still love volume, and I still think you have to have a certain amount of volume to do certain things. However, I think that can be adjusted. All right. Anyway, given all that, I think the idea of cumulative fatigue has been misconstrued a bit. I think that there are a couple of ideas that I'd like to talk about to kind of clarify cumulative fatigue, but also show you how you can individualize the Hanson's marathon method to your own schedule and your own needs, but still be getting what you need to out of what we're trying to accomplish. And so to start it off, in the second edition of the book, there's a little call out that defines cumulative fatigue as the accumulation of fatigue over days, weeks, and even months of consistent training. And looking back at it today, I realized that was pretty vague. I should have said something to the effect of it starts in the days, but it should take several weeks to really show itself. And the problem with the definition I put in the book is that, not besides being too vague, is that so many runners interpret that as they should be feeling the fatigue within the first few weeks of training. And then they should learn how to manage that over the course of the remaining months. And I get it. I just read it. It's easy to interpret it that way. And the truth is that it's a slow buildup, and it's not just one workout. It's the slow buildup of fatigue that hopefully doesn't really show up until you get to that last 8 weeks or so of the plan. I've always viewed it as when you start the strength segment, so the 6x1, the 4x1.5, 3x2, 2x3, whatever else I've put in schedules, that's really when the full race specific part of the schedule starts. So really that last 6 to 8 weeks. And that's when you really should start noticing the buildup of cumulative fatigue. What I see so many times is that runners feel it way before that. And, and I'm recording this in August, and it's a perfect example where people started training. They started their 18 weeks out in June, maybe first part of July. They've, if they're in beginner plan, they've gone through the 4 weeks of easy. They started in the speed. Advanced plan, they started in the speed right away. And they're already feeling it, and they haven't even gotten to the strength part of the segment because of combination of factors. Usually it's running too fast on their speed. The marathon pace is a big jump in what they have actually accomplished. It's hot out. It's brutal training in the summer, and they've just gone way past the point of cumulative fatigue and right into overtraining. They haven't really let anything build up. It just kind of jumped right into it, right? And so that's where I see a lot of the problems. So given that, a term that I've seen recently in the last few years is that the idea of running resiliency. And the definition I have heard of this is that it's the ability to perform a task at a specific pace despite being tired. And this really lines up well with how I would describe cumulative fatigue if I had better words, right? It's feeling tired during before you get to a workout, you start kind of thinking about it. You're like, man, my legs don't feel the greatest. Um, I'm tired. I just feel sluggish. And then you get through your warm up and you're like, maybe a little bit better. Then you get in through the first mile of the workout and you're feeling a little bit better. But before you know it, you've settled into rhythm. You feel significantly better. You finish the race. You finish the workout feeling much better, and you move on with your day. That is cumulative fatigue. And that's really how you should be feeling once you get into that strength segment of the segment. And so it's really feeling tired before in the first part of the workout, but get done feeling well and feeling much better. And so with cumulative fatigue, I would describe that really into your individual workouts feeling that way, but how you feel overall for the weeks, the last 6 weeks, like you feel tired on general, but your workouts are going okay. If you're saying that and it's in your speed segment, then we need to take a look, because that's not really cumulative fatigue. It's not resiliency. That's just starting to get into overtraining, and that's usually the culprit of running too fast for where you are currently at. And so that's how I would modify this, is just kind of really talking more about the idea of resiliency and how you should be approach that, and that you should be working to build into this cumulative fatigue. It's not something you should be desiring to feel the first 4 to 6 weeks of the training plan. So there's a couple areas of clarification where I would like to kind of move into that resiliency. How do you set yourself up more for that slow buildup rather than just jumping right into it? And the first idea I would address with individuals is take a lot of people. I get this so many times, is where people read the book, and I love it on one hand because it means you're really taking to heart what's being said, but you're like, the book says Tuesdays, Thursdays, Sundays, right? And I just want you to know that there is no law that says Tuesdays have to be speed or strength, Thursdays have to be your tempo, Sundays have to be your long run. That's not the only way you get into cumulative fatigue. You can do it a number of ways. And the truth is, I make adjustments all the time for people when I'm coaching them individually. I personally lay out a lot of different things for people. Like, so if you look at it now, Monday, Friday, Saturday are typically your easy days. Saturdays, with that being said, Saturday's usually a longer easy run. Tuesdays either speed or strength. Thursdays are tempo days. Sunday's a long run day. Wednesday is your off day. And people are afraid to move from that. And maybe it's because they don't know how to do it. And so I want you to just know that it's not it's going to take a lot for you to mess that up, because we're doing so much work that it's going to get you into cumulative fatigue eventually anyway. But if you need to move things around, then that's perfectly fine. I've said this many times before, but Tuesday and Thursday is usually the biggest culprit of getting people too fatigued too soon. And I love spacing this out more. I love spacing it either going Tuesday and Friday, or if somebody really wants a Saturday long run, then we'll go Monday, Thursday, Saturday, something like that. I actually even just had a person ask, like, hey man, my Tuesday is the best day I have to do a long run. Can I do it on Tuesday and just move everything else out accordingly? Absolutely. No problem with that at all. So don't feel like you need to have it as it's laid out in the book. That's a best fit template that works really well, but you can move things around to fit yourself. And I think the biggest thing I would see people doing is giving themselves an extra day between the speed and strength and the tempo. And that really, really helps out a lot. 2 caveats to this. I really discourage going back-to-back SOS days. I think if you're limited on time to get SOS days in, so like, so a lot of times people will go like Tuesday or Wednesday, do their speed or strength, and then like they don't have any time the rest of the week, so they'll they'll go and do tempo on Saturday, long run on Sunday, which I know is a Hal Higdon thing. I personally don't like it. Not a knock on Hal Higdon, but I'm just saying that I think over time, if you do that all the time, I think that creates more problems than what it's worth. I think if you're in that situation, what you should do is combine your long run and your tempo run in some capacity and then do that. I really would avoid doing SOS days. Now, if it's 1 week, is it the end of the world? No, absolutely not. But I think if it's something that you are planning on doing every week, I would avoid that. The other thing is that one thing I've really grown into believing is that what makes that 16, people will say, oh, the 16-mile long run, it's not long enough. Kevin's always said the 16-mile is really the last 16 and not the first 16. And I get like the Tuesdays and Thursdays really add into that, but you still have, even if you follow Tuesday, Thursday setup, you still have Friday and Saturday to recover and then go into Sunday, which for most people you should be pretty good unless you're really hammering your easy days. So now I've really grown to think over the last few years is that what really makes that 16-mile long run work is the Saturday, because the Saturday is usually 8 to 10 miles, and then you go into 14 to 16 miles the next day. And so what happens is if you set that up right, you can run 24 to 26 miles in a 24-hour period. And that's really what makes that 16-miler feel so much more fatiguing than it normally would, because you already have all that stuff in your legs from the day before, not even 24 hours before. And I think that's huge. And I think that's kind of where, maybe that's where Hal Higdon's going with that, whether you do the tempo run and then you do the long run. But with that, oh man, that, and then you're talking way more miles. You're talking, I think with some of that, you can talk about being 30 plus miles. And I think that, so I think if you go that route, it's 30 plus miles plus a fairly hard day the day before the long run. And then you're really going into fatigue on that long run. So to me, that's too far. I want you to pull back from that edge a little bit and be fresh enough where you can bounce back and do something on Tuesday. And I think the way Kevin and Keith set that up is brilliant. I love the way that's set up, and I think that's what makes it work so much. So I think, so when you hear people, I guess I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but when you hear people talk about, oh, the 16-mile long run doesn't work, they're not looking at the whole setup. I guarantee you, they're just looking at what's on that Sunday, and that's it. They're not looking at everything else that you're doing. And so should people be running 20 miles? I don't care if you run 20 miles, but I think when you look at the way the schedule is set up, you forcing a 20 miler under the Hanson's marathon method is really is 100% a psychological thing, not a physiological thing. And that's you not believing in yourself, and that's not you believing in the training. And so, I mean, that's all I'm going to say about that, because I don't want to get down that rabbit hole. But to me, like when you look at the whole body of what the Hanson's marathon method is, you are well prepared for that because of everything else you're doing, not just one single run. Okay, enough of that soapbox. Second area that I would address is the progression of paces. And I think between not spacing workouts enough and then going right into goal pace can really wreak havoc on a person. And that's my fault. That's me doing a poor job of explaining that in the second edition. So I think where that comes down from is when I was at my peak, we were always just trying to chip away at end times, right? So if you ran 5 seconds a mile faster in the marathon, that's 2 minutes faster. So for me, that would take me from a 2:14 guy to a 2:12 guy real quick. And back then, 2:14 to 2:12 guy, I'm making significantly more money a year than being a 2:12 guy than you are a 2:14 guy. Even if you 10 seconds a mile, that takes me from being a really good runner to an Olympic hopeful one shot, right? And in training, a 5 to 10 second variance isn't that much. You really don't have to worry about being current versus goal, because you're going to be in that kind of standard deviation right away anyway. So you don't have to make these big adjustments. But I think if you take a person who's running, I use this example as a Boston qualifier, somebody going for a Boston qualifier, they're going for it no matter what. Sometimes you're talking about going 20 to 30 seconds faster per mile than what you've actually run in the marathon. And if that is you, we have to step back and address what that means and how to adjust that. So I get it. My wording, we talk about goal pace all the time, but I I think we make things that current, if you're using goal pace, we make it harder. We make it harder across the board. Like it makes your easy runs harder. It makes your speed harder. It makes your marathon pace not even a marathon pace. It's more like a lactate threshold at that point. And then your longer, your long runs at long run pace, if you're going into that, is probably more like your current marathon effort. And it's just overkill, right? We're not doing anything to build into it. So I would start with your current pace and build into that over time. And I would take the effort to do that. I think getting back on here instead of like I've talked about that, you're really just making everything harder than it needs to be. And so what's that doing is it's putting you into a overly fatigued state much sooner than we're looking for. So I would much rather see you take it current pace, do test efforts along the way every 3 to 4 weeks, adjust accordingly. And if you do that, by the time you get to the 8, 9, 10 mile tempo runs and the strength workouts, now goal pace is lining up with where you're currently at, or within that 5 to 10 second range, where it's not going to be a make or break situation. It's going to be line up much better. And I think that if I were to go back and adjust, I would do everything by current pace, set up efforts to adjust current pace until we got to a point where goal pace made sense. And hopefully that's that last 6 to 8 weeks of the segment. So what I would do is I would use your most recent race as a guide, especially if you've ran recently, or I would set up something where you do a 6-minute test and at the beginning of your segment, maybe do another one 4 weeks into it, and then go from there, compared to where you're at, and then adjust accordingly. And then even if you just kind of ratchet it down 5 to 10 seconds every, 4 weeks or so, you're going to be in a much better situation to actually get to that strength portion and still be in a position where you can train hard and build fitness, and you're not just hanging on for dear life. And that's really what I want to avoid. So that's what I would do. That's now a lot of what I do with athletes who are either new with me, or it's just been a long time since they've run anything, or they're trying to make a big jump. We're really going to be much more careful about building into that. But just to close out, rarely do I tell an athlete to work harder. 99.9% of you work really hard. And that is an amazing trait to have, but it's also a double-edged sword, because what I have to do most of the time with coaching is I have to pull those reins back and pull them from going over the edge too soon, and kind of gradually allow them to push harder and harder and harder until they get to that point where they're in that cumulative fatigue state. And then by the time they get to that, we don't have enough time left in the segment for it to get too ugly, because then we start to taper, and then we are racing, and we're racing at our best, instead of just, we're going into the race wanting to race, not glad that we made it through the segment and that we are just hanging on for dear life. That's really the biggest thing I want to avoid. So with that said, that's the biggest thing right now with what I would change 10 years after the fact that the second edition is out. I would really make those tweaks to explaining cumulative fatigue, and then getting a person into the right position to be in cumulative fatigue at the right time. So hopefully that helps you out. I appreciate you listening or reading this, and I will talk to you next time. Thanks.